Good evening. It is July 4th. Happy Independence Day. It is their 250th anniversary of independence of America. Woohoo. Tonight we're going to be reading from 2 Kings 23:31 through 25:30, Acts 22:17 through 24:10, Psalms Psalms 2 1 through 12, and Proverbs 18:13. Like every night, we like to do the Lord's Prayer, so we will join in with me. I greatly appreciate it. Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, and thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread. Forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us. Lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, the glory forever and ever. Amen. 2 Kings 23:31 through 25:30. Jehoaz was 23 years old when he began his rule. He was the king of Jerusalem for mere 3 months, whole 3 months. His mother's name was Hamultal, daughter of Jeremiah. They came from Libnah. In God's opinion, he was an evil king, reverting to the evil ways of his ancestors. Pharaoh Necho captured Jehoaz as Ribola in the country of Hamath and put him in chains, preventing him from ruling in Jerusalem. He demanded that Judah pay tribute to nearly 4 tons of silver and 75 pounds of gold. Then Pharaoh Necho made Eliakim, son of Josiah, the successor to Josiah, but changed his name to Jehoiakim. Jehoaz was carted off to Egypt and eventually died there. Meanwhile, Jehoiakim, like a good puppet, dutifully paid out the silver and gold demanded by the Pharaoh. He scraped up the money by gouging the people and making everyone pay and assess tax. Joachim was 25 years old when he began his rule. He was the king for 11 years in Jerusalem. His mother's name was Zebedah, daughter of Pedaiah. She came from Rumah. In God's opinion, he was an evil king, picking up the evil ways of his ancestors. It was during his reign that Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, invaded the country. Joachim became his puppet, but after 3 years he had enough and revolted. God dispatched a successor of raiding bands against him: Babylonian, Armenian, Moabite, and Ammonite. The strategy was to destroy Judah. Though the preaching of his servants and the prophets, God had said he would do this, and now he's doing it. None of this by chance. It was God's judgment as he turned his back on Judah because of the enormity of the sins of Manasseh. Manasseh, the killer king who made the Jerusalem streets flow with the innocent blood of his victims. God wasn't about to overlook such crimes. The rest of the life and times of Joachim, the writer, is written in the Chronicles of Kings of Judah. Joachim died and was buried with his ancestors. His son Jehoiachin became the next king. The threat from Egypt was now over. No more invasions of the king of Egypt. By the time the king of Babylon had captured all the land between the brook of Egypt and the Euphrates River, land for merely controlled by the king of Egypt. Jehoiachin was 18 years old when he became king. His rule in Jerusalem lasted only 3 months. His mother's name was Nahutsa, daughter of Eliathan, another 3-month reign. She was from Jerusalem. In God's opinion, he was an evil king and no different than his father. The next thing to happen was the officers of Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, attacked Jerusalem and put it under siege. While his officers were laying siege to the city, Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, paid a personal visit to Jehoiakim, king of Judah. Along with his mother's officers, advisors, and government leaders surrendered. In the 8th day of his reign, Joachim was taken prisoner by the king of Babylon. Nebuchadnezzar emptied the treasuries of both the temple of God and the royal palace and confiscated all the gold furnishings of Solomon, king of Israel, had made for the temple of God. This should have been no surprise. God said it would happen. And then he emptied Jerusalem of all people and all its leaders and soldiers and all the craftsmen and artisans. He took them into exile, something like 10,000 of them. The only ones left were the poor. He took Jehoiachin into exile to Babylon. With him, he took the king's mothers, his wives, his chief officers, the community leaders, everyone who was anybody, in round numbers, 7,000 soldiers plus another 1,000 or so craftsmen and artisans, all herded off into the exile in Babylon. Then the king of Babylon made Jehoiachin's uncle, Mathana, his puppet king, but exchanged his name to Zedekiah. Zedekiah was 21 years old when he started out as king. He was king in Jerusalem for 11 years. His mother's name was Hamutal, the daughter of Jeremiah. His hometown was Libnah. As far as God was concerned, Zedekiah was just one more evil king, a coward copy of Joachim, the source of all the doom of Israel, Jerusalem, and Judah with God's anger. God turned his back on them as an act of judgment, and then Zedekiah revolted against the kings of Babylon. The revolt dates from the 9th year to the 10th month of Zedekiah's reign. Nebuchadnezzar set out for Jerusalem immediately with a full army. He set up camp and sealed off the city, building siege mounds around it. The city was under siege for 19 months until the 11th year of Zedekiah. By the 4th month of the Zedekiah's 11th year, the 9th day of the month, the famine was so bad there wasn't so much as a crumb of bread for anyone. There were there there was a breakthrough at night under cover of darkness. The entire army escaped through an opening in the wall. It was the gate between the two walls above the king's garden. They slipped through the lines of the Babylonians who surrounded the city and headed for the Jordan and Arabath Valley. But the Babylonians were in pursuit of the kings and caught up with them in the plains of the Jericho. By then, Zedekiah's army had been deserted and scattered. The Babylonians took Zedekiah prisoner and marched him off to the king of Babylon in Riblah. They tried to sentence him on the spot. Zedekiah's sons were executed right before his eyes. The summary murder of his sons was the last thing he saw and then blinded him. Securely handcuffed, then hauled off to Babylon. On 19th year, Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, on the 7th day of the 5th month, Nebzaradan, the king of Babylon's chief deputy, arrived in Jerusalem. He burned the temple of God to the ground, went to the royal palace, and then finished off the city. Burned the whole place down. He put the Babylonian troops he had with him to work, knocking down the city walls. Finally, he rounded up everyone left in the city, including those who had entered, deserted to the king of Babylon. He took them off into exile. He left a few poor dirt farmers behind to tend the vineyards, and that was what was left of the fields. The Babylonians broke up the bronze pillars, the bronze washstands, and the huge bronze basins. The sea that were in the temple of God hauled in the bronze off Babylon. Then they took the various bronze crafted liturgical accessories used in the services of the temple of worship, as well as the gold, silver censers and sprinkling bowls. The king's deputy didn't miss a thing. He took every scrap of precious metal he could find. The amount of bronze they got from the two pillars, the sea, and all the washstands that Solomon had made for the temple of God was enormous. They couldn't weigh it all. Each pillar stood 27 feet high, plus another 4.5 feet on for an ornate capital of the bronze filigree and decorative fruit. The king's deputy took a number of special prisoners: Sariah, the chief priest; Zephaniah, the associate priest; 3 wardens, the chief remaining army officer; 5 of the king's counselors, an accountant; the chief recruiting officer in the army of 60 men standing from among the people. Nebuzaradan, the king's deputy, marched them off to the king of Babylon in Riblah. And there in Riblah, the land of Hamath, the king of Babylon killed a lot of them in cold blood. Judah went into exile, orphaned from her land. Regarding the common people who were left behind in Judah, this Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, appointed Gedaliah, son of Achim, the son of Shaphan, as their governor. When the veteran army officer among the people heard that the king of Babylon had appointed Gedaliah, they came to Gedaliah at Mizpah. Among them were Ishmael, son of Nathaniel, Jonathan, son of Kareah, Sarah, son of Timuth, and Neptalite, Jahaziel, son of Mashalite, and some of their followers. God bless y'all. Gedaliah assures the officers and their men, giving them his word. Don't be afraid of the Babylonian officers. Go back to your farms and families and respect the king of Babylon. Trust me, everything is going to be all right. Sometime later, it was in the 17th month, Ishmael, son of Nathaniel, the son of Elishma, he had royal blood in him, came back with 10 men and killed Gedaliah, the traitor Jews, and the Babylonian officers who were stationed at the Mizpah at a bloody massacre. But then, afraid of what the Babylonians would do, they took off for Egypt, leaders of the people, and small and great. When Jehoiachin, king of Judah, had been in exile for 37 years, evil Merodach became king of Babylon and let Jerushin out of prison. This release took place on the 27th day of the 12th month. The king treated him most courteously and gave him preferential treatment beyond anything experienced by the other political prisoners held in Babylon. Jehoiachin took off his prison garb and for the rest of his life ate his meals in company with the king. The king provided anything he needed to live comfortably. The breakdown of 2 Kings 23:31 through 25:30. The passage records the tragic fall of the king of Judah after the death of the godly king Josiah. A series of wicked kings reject God. The nation continues in rebellion, and Nebuchadnezzar conquers Jerusalem, destroying the temple, tears down the city walls, and carries the people into exile into Babylon. Yet the book ends with a small glimpse of hope of the captive king Jehoiachin. It shows kindness and released from prison, reminding us that God has not forgotten his covenant of his people. Sin is real, consequences, but God's mercy is never completely absent. Even in seasons of discipline, he leaves room for hope and restoration. Thank God we're done with Kings. We'll be in, I think it's Samuel tomorrow. First in Kings. First in Chronicles. We'll be in First Chronicles, not Samuel yet. Acts 22:17 through 24:10. Paul continued, well, it happened just as Ananias said. After I went back in Jerusalem praying one day in the temple, lost in the presence of God, I saw God's righteous innocent, and heard him say, hurry up, get me out of here quickly as you can. None of the Jews here in Jerusalem are going to accept what you say about me. At first I objected, who has better credentials? They all know how obsessed I was with hunting out those who believe in you, beating them up in the meeting places and throwing them in jail. And when your witness, Stephen, was murdered, I was right there holding the coats of the murderers and cheering them on. And now they see me totally converted. What better qualifications could I have? But he said, don't argue. Go. I'm sending you a long journey to outsider non-Jews. The people in the crowd had listened attentively at this point, and now they broke loose, shouting, kill him. He's an insect. Stomp on him. They shook their fists. They filled the air with curses. That's when the captain intervened and ordered Paul taken to the barracks. By now, the captain was thoroughly exasperated. He decided to interrogate Paul under torture in order to get to the bottom of this, to find out what he had done to provoke this outraged violence. As they spread-eagled him with strips of leather, getting him ready for the whip, Paul said to the centurion standing there, is this legal, torturing a Roman citizen without a fair trial? When the centurion heard that, he went directly to the captain. Do you realize what you've done? This man is a Roman citizen. The captain came back and took charge. Is what I hear right? You're a Roman citizen? Paul said, I certainly am. The captain was impressed. I paid a huge sum for my citizenship. How much did it cost you? Nothing, Paul said. It cost me nothing. I am free from the day of my birth. That put a stop to the interrogation, and it put a fear of God into the captain. He put a Roman citizen in chains and came up with a whisker of putting him under torture. The next day, determined to get to the root of the trouble and know for sure what was behind the Jewish accusation, the captain released Paul and ordered a meeting of the high priest and the high council to see what they could make of it. Paul was led in and took his place before them. Paul surveyed the members of the council with a steady gaze and then said his piece. Friends, I've lived with a clear conscience before God all my life up until this very moment. That set the chief priest Ananias off. He ordered his aides to slap Paul in the face. Paul shot back, God will slap you down. What a fake you are. You sit here and you judge me by the law and then break the law by ordering me slapped around. The aides were scandalized. How dare you talk to God's chief priest like that? Paul acted surprised. How was I to know he was a chief priest? He didn't act like a chief priest. You're right. The scripture doesn't say don't speak abusively towards the ruler of the people. Sorry. Paul, knowing some of the council was made up of the Sadducees and others of the Pharisees, and how they hated each other, decided to exploit the antagonism. Friends, I'm a stalwart Pharisee from a long line of Pharisees. It's because of my Pharisee convictions, the hope and resurrection of the dead, that I've been hauled into this court. The moment he said the council split right down the middle, Pharisees and Sadducees going to each side in a heated argument. Sadducees had nothing to do with the resurrection or angels or even a spirit. If they can't see it, they can't believe it. Pharisees believe it all. And so a huge and noisy quarrel broke out, and some of the religious scholars and the Pharisees side shouted down to others, "We don't find anything wrong with this man, and what if a spirit has spoken to him? Or maybe even an angel? What if it turns out we're fighting against God?" That was fuel on the fire. The quarrel flamed up and began so violent that the captain was afraid they would tear Paul apart, limb from limb. He ordered the soldiers to get him out of there and escort him back to the safety of the barracks. Acts 22:17 through 24:10, Paul continues to defend his faith before hostile crowds, religious leaders, and Roman officials. He shares that Jesus called him to preach to the Gentiles, which enrages many of his listeners. Paul is protected by Rome citizenship, appears before the Sanhedrin, survives a plot to assassinate him, and is eventually brought before Governor Felix. Though every trial, God fulfills his promise that Paul would testify about Christ before rulers. The application: God can use opposition as an opportunity. What feels like a setback may actually be a platform he uses to advance his purpose. Psalms 2 1 through 12. Why the big noise, nations? Why the mean plots, peoples? Earth leaders push for position. Demagogues and delegates meet for summit talks. The God deniers and the Messiah defiers. Let's get free of God. Cast loose from Messiah. Heaven throne God breaks out laughing. At first he's amused at their presumption. Then he gets good and angry fiercely and shuts them up. Don't you know there's a king in Zion, a coronation banquet? It's spread from him on the holy summit. Let me tell you what God said next. He said, "You're my son, and today it's your birthday. What do you want? Name it. Nations as a present, comments as a prize. You can command them all to dance for you, or throw them out for tomorrow's trash. So, rebel kings, use your heads. Upstart judges, learn your lesson. Worship God in an adoring embrace. Celebrate in trembling awe. Kiss Messiah. Your very lives are in danger. You know his anger is about to explode. But if you make a run for God, you won't regret it." Breakdown of Psalms 2 1 through 12. The psalm declares God absolute authority over the nations. Earthly rulers may rebel against him, but God is never threatened. He has established his king, the Messiah, whose kingdom will ultimately reign forever. The psalm ends with an invitation to submit to the Son and find blessing and refuge in him. The world may seem chaotic, but God is still on his throne. Real peace comes from trusting and submitting his rule. Proverbs 18:13. Answering before listening is both stupid and rude. I've gotten a lot better about that. Answer before listening is both stupid and rude. Proverbs 18:13. To answer before listening, that is folly and shame. This proverb teaches the importance of listening before speaking, jumping to conclusions, interrupting others, or responding without understanding the full story often leads to mistakes and damaged relationships. Wise people listen carefully before they speak. Seek first to understand, then to be understood. Listening is one of the greatest expressions of wisdom and love. Excuse me. If no one told you today, I love you and I appreciate you. Looking forward to tomorrow. We're starting First Chronicles. I'm excited about that. I hope you had a great 4th of July and a safe 4th of July. We will see you tomorrow, and it will be July 5th. I love you. Have a better than good night. We'll see you tomorrow.